Hello everyone, today we are focusing on Acts chapter 16, specifically the last bit of Acts chapter 16, which is verses 16 to 40. In this chapter we see Paul and Silas have sailed to a place called Philippi, which is a Roman city, and they're walking through the place of prayer when this slave girl comes behind them and starts shouting things at them because she's got what they called an evil spirit inside of her. And she keeps doing this for days and days, and it says actually that Paul gets annoyed and he casts the demon out in Jesus' name. And the owner of this slave girl is not very happy about it, so he goes to the Roman officials and gets Paul and Silas thrown in prison for what they've done. And whilst in prison, they start worshipping and singing, and eventually there's a massive earthquake and all the chains fall off all the prisoners that are in the same cell as Paul and Silas. But instead of escaping, they all sit there and wait for the guards to come and find them. And in this process, the jailer was actually going to kill himself because he would have gotten in deep trouble if any of the prisoners would have escaped. And when he sees all the chains falling off, he's about to kill himself with his sword, but Paul's like, stop! And he shares with the jailer about Jesus, and this jailer becomes a Christian. He goes home and celebrates with his family. And that is the end of this story. Okay, so moving back a little bit to the beginning of this story, Paul and his friend Silas were going around Philippi and cast out this demon and are brought before the Roman officials. And it says actually that before they were in prison, they were stripped of their clothes and flogged. When I read that, I was like, that sounds a lot like what happened to Jesus. And then I was reminded of this verse in Matthew 16 that says, "Pick up your cross and follow me," which is a saying that Jesus said. That basically means that if you become a follower of Christ, you have to be ready to go and suffer the same things that Jesus suffered, which is what we can see Paul and Silas doing. But in our own lives, becoming a Christian is not a decision that we should take lightly. We should be ready to go through the same challenges that Jesus went through as well. And are we ready to do that? In the next bit, we also see two reactions to a desperate situation. So Paul and Silas, they're in this cold, probably wet and smelly jail, and instead of moaning, we read that they worship God. And it says all the other prisoners can hear them, they can hear them worshipping, which for us might seem a really strange thing to do in a time of confusion, something that they haven't got any control over. They don't really know what's going to happen to them, but they still worship God. Are we able to do that today? We all know what situation we're in today, a time where we don't have any control really about what's going on around us. Can we worship God through this time? The second reaction to a desperate situation is the jailer, and we see that he is actually about to kill himself out of desperation because he's recognised that he's going to get in so much trouble. He has no control over this situation, so he takes it into his own hands. But Paul tells him about Jesus just in the nick of time. How do we react in desperate times? Do we try and sort it out ourselves, which for me always goes wrong? Or do we appeal to God and look to Jesus? Do we know the hope of knowing Jesus and knowing that whatever happens, He is always there, and having that hope that whatever happens, we're going to have a life with Him after this one? It says that towards the end of this chapter that the jailer's household rejoiced with him because he'd made this decision to follow Jesus. Instead of people being sad because he'd taken his own life, people were rejoicing because he'd found a new life. And we can all find that new life as well. Whatever decisions that we have made in the past or choices that might have not been the best choices, we all have this promise of a new life. All we have to do is just say, Jesus, that I want to follow you. We can have that hope of knowing Jesus, knowing that He's always with us, and knowing that whatever happens, in whatever circumstances, we have the hope of spending an eternity with Him in the next life after this.